Hey, I'm not MAGA, don't scroll. And how bad do I think the conditions at the Alligator Auschwitz are going to be based on my 8 years of experience in the prison system? I'm so glad that you asked, so that I can tell these horrific stories right now and impress upon people exactly how poor these conditions are likely to be. Because every story that I tell you guys is going to be from the perspective of people that are citizens, people that at least allegedly, on paper, have rights. Because what has been the rhetoric from the right, what has the de facto dictator and his clown car cabinet repeated over and over again about undocumented people? Oh, that they allegedly don't have any rights. And let me tell you, you don't go to the trouble of attempting to convince one group of people that another group of people doesn't have rights unless you intend to violate the hell out of them. So let me tell you a story of the cruelty that I witnessed to American citizens that actually do have acknowledged rights on paper. I walked up to the cell of another inmate to see him standing there. Trigger warning, trigger warning, trigger warning. I walked up to the cell of another inmate to see him standing there in his underwear with a broken safety razor in his hand. He was staring at himself in the mirror, and he was covered in blood. He had cut himself across both wrists, and he had written the word done, like D-O-N-E, I'm done, in blood letters across the back wall of his cell. Upon seeing this, I was, of course, shocked and involuntarily said out loud, oh shit, which snapped him out of his trance momentarily. He looked around and he looked at me and he went, oh, as if to say he was surprised by the state of things himself, and then he wandered off down towards the shower stall. He didn't make it long in the shower. It was maybe 10 seconds before we heard him bounce off the walls and hit the ground, at which point I started kicking the door of our housing unit as hard as I could until corrections staff finally came running to threaten me about kicking the door. And I indicated that there was a man down in the shower. They told us to lock down so that they could come in and get him out of there. So we all lock down in our cells, and they come in and they pull him out of the shower, and we expect them to immediately engage in life-saving intervention, of course. They dragged him out of there with a trail of blood streaming out behind him and flopped him face down over a table in the day room, and then they stood there and watched. And we're all now yelling at this point, help him, help him. And they're now yelling back that if we don't shut up, if we don't stop creating a disturbance, that they're going to keep us on lockdown indefinitely and turn this into a segregation unit. We're going to be punished if we don't stop advocating for this person to receive medical help. He then has a seizure, I'm guessing from loss of blood and the shock of everything, of course, and flops off of the table, hits his head on the ground, injures himself further. And they pick him back up and flop him over the table. I don't know why they didn't just leave him on the ground. It would have been safer at that point. But they flopped him back over the table and then just sat there with their arms crossed, watching him bleed. Nothing was done to help him until the paramedics arrived sometime later and hauled him on out of there. I cleaned that mess up. I did it myself. I'm a microbial remediator by trade. I grew up doing it, and they told us that we were going to remain on lockdown until they could get something to clean it up, and it was probably going to be several days before that happened, and we couldn't be exposed to a biohazard and blah, blah. And I convinced one of the guards to let me do it. You know, I convinced him that I knew how. And so I went out there, and I cleaned up that kid's blood, so that we could come off a lockdown and go back about our business like we didn't just watch him bleed and drag him out of there, like his life meant nothing to them. Nothing. I can only imagine how people that they have dehumanized and spit the rhetoric that they don't have rights, I can only imagine how those people are going to be treated.